There will come a moment in your life, maybe it's today, maybe it was yesterday, when your body, your mind, every cell in you screams stop. You're exhausted, you're uncomfortable, you're doubting. And it's in that moment, right then, that your nervous system is watching. Your brain is listening. It's asking, what do we do when it gets hard? Do we flinch or do we forge? Because you're not here to be comfortable. You're here to evolve. Your brain is not a machine that breaks under pressure. It's a machine that builds under pressure. Every time you face resistance, you are not just experiencing difficulty. You are receiving an opportunity to rewire the circuits of who you are. You want motivation? Stop waiting for it. You want momentum? Create it. Stand up right now and decide that you will act before you feel ready. Because readiness is not a prerequisite for greatness. Commitment is. When you pursue something difficult, your brain releases dopamine, not just when you succeed, but when you chase. That means your biology is built to reward the effort, not just the outcome. Which means the more uncomfortable it is, the more powerful the reward mechanism becomes if you lean in. That's the difference between someone who watches life and someone who transforms it. The observer waits for conditions to change. The warrior changes their relationship with resistance. With resistance. One waits for the mountain to shrink. The other climbs anyway. If you've hit a plateau, good. That means your previous level is now your baseline. That's not a reason to coast. That's a signal to rise. Force yourself to level up. Train your mind like you train your body, deliberately, repetitively, intensely. Stop negotiating with your limitations. Interrupt the script that says, I can't. Replace it with a what if I do? Your nervous system is plastic. Your identity is malleable, but nothing changes until you demand it. Adieu. Feed your mind light, early sunlight. Feed your body breath, deep intentional nasal. Sit in silence until your thoughts calm. Then go out and do something that scares you, that stretches you, that invites you to become more than yesterday. Do it without applause, without clarity, without certainty. Do it when you're tired. Do it when no one believes in you. Do it when even you don't fully believe in you. Because the act of doing it, that is belief. That is transformation. That is neurobiological proof that you are no longer who you used to be. Neuroplasticity is the brain's remarkable ability to rewire itself in response to experience, but it doesn't happen passively. Change at the neural level requires conscious engagement and consistent effort. Every thought you repeat, every skill you practice, every emotion you manage, these are not abstract habits. They are literal electrical and chemical signals reshaping the structure of your brain. But this adaptation only occurs under conditions of focused attention and meaningful struggle. The brain isn't reconfigured through ease or repetition alone. It responds most deeply when you push yourself to the edge of your capability and stay there. When you challenge yourself to learn a difficult skill, regulate an emotion, or replace a limiting belief, you are physically altering the connections between neurons. This synaptic remodeling is energy intensive and demands repetition. That's why sporadic effort doesn't lead to lasting transformation. Neural pathways form and strengthen through friction, through effortful, uncomfortable engagement with new behavior. When you resist distraction, when you concentrate through boredom or fatigue, you activate the exact neurochemical environment required for plasticity, one rich in acetylcholine, dopamine, and noradrenaline. These chemicals don't flood your brain during passive consumption. They are released in response to directed action. Most people misunderstand neuroplasticity as something that happens automatically, simply because time passes or information is absorbed. In reality, your brain only rewires in response to what you do with intention and repetition, and it keeps what you reinforce. So if you repeatedly avoid challenge, your brain adapts to make that avoidance easier. If you lean into growth consistently and deliberately, your brain will wire for strength, focus, and learning. This is the biological truth. Neuroplasticity is not only real, it's always happening. The question is, are you directing it, or are you being shaped by default? Default. Stress, when framed correctly, is not a threat to avoid, but a signal to grow. Most people instinctively resist stress, seeing it as something negative, something to escape. But biologically and psychologically, stress serves a far more important purpose. It mobilizes the body's internal resources to face challenge, sharpen focus, and drive adaptation. When we encounter stress, our nervous system activates a cascade of processes, the release of adrenaline, elevation in heart rate, increased blood flow to muscles, and heightened mental alertness. This is not dysfunction. This is design. It's the body preparing itself for something meaningful. What determines whether this process becomes destructive or transformative is the lens through which we interpret it. The framing of stress, what we believe about it, directly impacts how it affects us. Scientific research shows that individuals who view stress as enhancing rather than depleting experience improved performance, greater resilience, and faster recovery. This isn't a motivational slogan. It's rooted in measurable physiological changes. When you see stress as an opportunity to rise, your brain doesn't just cope, it adapts. It lays down new neural connections, strengthens synapses, and engages circuits responsible for learning and memory. Your heart still beats faster, but now it's helping you focus. Your muscles still tighten, but now they're primed for action. That shift in interpretation, this stress means I'm growing, changes everything. The key lies in voluntary exposure. When you willingly step into difficult environments, when you intentionally place yourself in situations that are slightly beyond your current capacity, the stress you feel becomes a growth stimulus. This is known as hormesis, the principle that small intermittent doses of stress create long-term resilience. It's the foundation of physical training, but it applies just as much to emotional regulation, cognitive development, and spiritual fortitude. Cold exposure, intense workouts, difficult conversations, public speaking, fasting, or disciplined work routines all are controlled stressors that rewire the brain to handle more. Each time you face them, your stress threshold expands. Your system learns that discomfort does not equal danger. But there is a critical nuance here. The difference between good stress and toxic stress is not always in the event itself, but in your ability to recover and assign meaning to it. Chronic, uncontrollable stress without rest, reflection, or purpose can break down the body and the mind. But acute, purposeful stress followed by rest and integration leads to adaptation. This is why framing matters. If stress is seen as a signal to escape, it closes you down. If it is seen as a signal to engage, it wakes you up. The very same event, a setback, a confrontation, a failure, can either deteriorate your self-concept or develop your capacity, depending on how you respond. In those moments of stress, your brain is listening closely. It is taking notes on how you interpret difficulty. If you meet stress with avoidance or despair, it wires circuits for fear and retreat. But if you meet stress with courage and commitment, even if you're trembling, it begins to associate effort with reward. This is how new identities are built, not just in thought, but in circuitry. Over time, you become someone who doesn't just handle stress, but transforms through it. Stress framed correctly is not only a catalyst, it is a spiritual teacher. It shows you where you are weak so you can become strong. It reveals what you fear so you can learn courage. It breaks routine so you can access reinvention. Stress is the furnace of growth. You can fear it or you can use it, but you cannot ignore it because every level you want to reach requires a new version of you. And stress, when embraced with intention, is how that version is forged. Discipline is often mistaken for sheer willpower, a force you summon through grit and internal struggle. But in reality, discipline is far more physiological than people realize. It is a neurochemical process governed by the brain's reward systems, particularly dopamine. Understanding this changes everything because it means discipline is not a trait that some people are born with and others are not. It's a system that can be trained, optimized, and deliberately activated. Dopamine is the molecule of motivation, but it's often misunderstood as the chemical of pleasure. What dopamine actually governs is pursuit. It's released when you anticipate something meaningful, when you take action toward a goal, not just when you achieve it. This means the act of showing up, especially in the absence of reward, is what builds discipline at a neurochemical level. Each time you initiate a task, starting the workout, writing the page, sitting to meditate, you signal the dopamine system that you are in pursuit of something valuable, That action alone begins to reshape your brain circuitry to favor effort over ease. The key is that discipline isn't just about pushing harder. It's about strategically training your brain to find reward in the effort. When you focus on the process, not the outcome, you engage the dopaminergic systems in a more sustainable way. If you constantly chase outcomes, dopamine spikes only when you win and crashes hard when you don't. But if you learn to associate effort with internal reward, acknowledging your own commitment, progress, and engagement, then your baseline motivation begins to rise. This isn't theory, this is physiology. Your brain adapts to what you repeat. So if you repeatedly delay gratification, show up under resistance, and stay consistent with your routines, your neurochemistry begins to shift. You start releasing dopamine not because you finished the task, but because you've started it. This is how habits are formed, and more importantly, how identity is transformed. Discipline becomes who you are because the brain rewires to make it easier and more satisfying to act in disciplined ways. This also explains why certain protocols, like limiting distraction, managing sleep, getting sunlight early in the day, cold exposure, and breath work are so powerful. They create the physiological conditions for discipline. Early morning sunlight regulates your circadian rhythms, which directly influence dopamine production. Cold exposure boosts norepinephrine and dopamine levels, increasing alertness and drive. Deep nasal breathing activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control and long-term planning. These aren't hacks, they are biological leverage points that, when used consistently, increase your capacity to act with discipline. Still, effort is required, especially early on. When you first begin practicing discipline, it may feel mechanical, forced, even joyless. That's normal. The neural pathways for distraction and avoidance have likely been reinforced for years. But each time you override them, you send a signal to your nervous system. This is who I'm becoming now. And the brain listens. With enough repetition, what once took extreme effort becomes natural behavior. And what was once foreign becomes familiar. Discipline is not about being perfect or rigid. It's about understanding how the brain works and then aligning your life with those principles. You don't need to shame yourself into action. You need to train yourself into action. You do that by engineering your environment, managing your inputs, and committing to systems rather than moods. Because moods are fleeting, but neurochemical patterns are programmable. When you realize that discipline is neurochemical, not just an abstract form of inner strength, you reclaim your power. You stop waiting for motivation to arrive. You start generating it chemically through repeated aligned action. That's not just empowering, it's transformational. Every action you take each day is a signal to your nervous system. And over time, those signals compound to shape who you are. This is the foundation of identity. Not lofty intentions or abstract affirmations, but repeated behaviors aligned with a specific internal standard. Your brain and body are constantly being programmed by what you do consistently, and daily protocols, deliberate routines built on biological principles, are the most powerful tools for this transformation. They do more than structure your day. They sculpt your character. Waking up at a consistent time, getting sunlight in your eyes within the first 30 to 60 minutes of the day, engaging in movement, breathwork, or journaling, these might seem like small acts, but they're not. They are neurobiological triggers that prime your system for focus, resilience, and action. Morning sunlight doesn't just wake you up. It sets your circadian rhythm, which controls hormone release, energy levels, sleep quality, and dopamine production. Movement increases blood flow to the brain and supports neuroplasticity. Breathwork shifts your autonomic nervous system into states of calm or alertness depending on the need. These practices, done consistently, begin to define not just how you feel, but how you function. Identity is not a fixed trait. It's a process of becoming, and your protocols are the blueprint. When you commit to a set of actions each day, regardless of mood, you create a dialogue with yourself that says, I am someone who shows up, and the brain rewires accordingly. Neurons that fire together wire together. So if you repeatedly wake up early, hydrate, train, reflect, or learn, the neural pathways responsible for discipline, focus, and emotional regulation become stronger. These behaviors go from being things you do to being reflections of who you are. What makes protocols so effective is their neutrality. They don't rely on how you feel. They are decisions made in advance. Systems that override indecision, fatigue, or distraction. This matters because motivation is unreliable, and the brain naturally seeks efficiency, not challenge. Protocols reduce the number of decisions you need to make each day, which conserves willpower and reinforces a sense of internal order. Over time, this builds trust with yourself. And that self-trust is the cornerstone of confidence. It's also why protocols must be aligned with your values and goals. Hotter. If your actions are random or reactive, the brain receives conflicting messages about who you are. But if your actions are consistent and intentional, even if they're small, the brain begins to form a clear model of identity. That clarity leads to momentum. You no longer wake up wondering what kind of day you'll have. You decide through action. And that decisiveness creates a positive feedback loop. You do what you said you'd do, which reinforces belief, which fuels more action. Even on hard days, especially on hard days, your protocols become anchors. They are evidence that you're not at the mercy of circumstance. You are choosing structure, choosing alignment, choosing growth. This is not about rigidity. It's about direction. Your brain thrives on rhythm and predictability. That's how it learns. That's how it builds. And when you honor your protocols, you're not just managing time, you're training your nervous system to respond to life with intentionality rather than reactivity. Most people chase breakthroughs, but transformation is rarely explosive. It's layered, quiet, and consistent. It happens in the early morning silence, in the pause before the impulse, in the decision to do what's necessary over what's easy. And that happens through protocols. They're not habits you follow. They're actions you embody. And when you embody them long enough, they stop being discipline and start being identity. That's when change becomes permanent. That's when you become unstoppable. What you focus on determines how your brain and body respond, not just psychologically, but chemically. Vision, both literal and metaphorical, has a direct influence on the state of your nervous system. Where you place your attention tells your brain what's important, and your biology follows that lead. This isn't poetic metaphor. It's measurable physiology. The way you direct your eyes, the thoughts you entertain, the goals you contemplate, all of these dictate the neurochemical environment in which your mind and body operate. When your eyes fixate on a specific point, especially at a distance, your internal state changes. This kind of visual anchoring activates systems in the brainstem and midbrain responsible for arousal and focus. Conversely, softening your gaze or allowing your vision to become panoramic shifts you into a more relaxed, parasympathetic state. This interplay between the mechanics of sight and your state of being is crucial. It means you can influence how you feel, alert, calm, motivated, or centered, simply by altering where and how you look. Vision, in the most literal sense, is a lever for controlling your internal chemistry. But it doesn't stop at the physical. Your mental vision, your capacity to imagine, plan, and hold a future in your mind, activates the brain's reward. Rest is often misunderstood as the absence of effort, a time to check out, distract, or escape. But true, deliberate rest is not passive. It's a strategic component of growth, performance, and resilience. In the same way training stresses the muscles to grow, intentional rest is what allows adaptation to occur. Without recovery, effort becomes depletion. Without rhythm, intensity becomes chaos. Your nervous system is not designed for nonstop output. It operates in oscillations, periods of focus and action followed by states of restoration and repair. And how you rest determines whether you return stronger or just survive another cycle of exhaustion. The brain, especially the prefrontal cortex, fatigues with sustained attention. This isn't weakness, it's biology. Focus consumes neural energy, especially in the form of neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine. Over time, as these deplete, your capacity for decision-making, willpower, and emotional regulation declines. Deliberate rest restores these systems. But the key is that not all rest is created equal. Scrolling endlessly, numbing out with screens, or drifting through aimless downtime doesn't replenish the brain. If anything, it taxes it further by feeding it more stimulation without depth or purpose. Strategic rest is active recovery for the nervous system. It's when you disengage from effort without disengaging from presence. Rest must be planned with as much intentionality as training or work. It includes protocols like non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, breathwork, meditation, nature exposure, and quality sleep. Each of these allows the body and brain to return to homeostasis, to flush stress hormones, to reset the autonomic balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic modes. Pain is inevitable, whether physical, emotional, or psychological. It's a universal part of growth, effort, and life itself. But the way we experience pain is not solely determined by the sensation. It is deeply influenced by what we believe that pain means. Purpose doesn't eliminate pain, but it radically transforms how it is processed by the brain and nervous system. When a person is connected to a clear and compelling why, the threshold for discomfort expands. Pain becomes information, not suffering. It becomes something to work through, not something to flee from. The human nervous system is highly sensitive to context. The same stimulus can be interpreted as intolerable or empowering, depending on the meaning we assign to it. Neuroscience has shown that when people endure physical stress, cold, heat, hunger, fatigue, with a strong sense of purpose or meaning attached, their pain response is modulated. Brain regions involved in threat detection are quieted, while those involved in reward and motivation are activated. In other words, purpose doesn't make the pain go away. It changes the brain's relationship to it. This is why athletes can push past their limits, why parents can stay up all night for their children, and why individuals facing immense adversity can move forward with strength and clarity. It's not superhuman willpower, it's purpose-driven biology. The dopamine system, which governs motivation and drive, becomes more active when effort is aligned with meaning. And dopamine doesn't just make us feel good, it helps us move through difficulty. It allows us to interpret pain as part of progress rather than a sign to stop. Pain without purpose leads to despair. It feels random, unfair, and punishing. But pain with purpose becomes fuel. It becomes a signal that something worthwhile is being pursued, that growth is underway, that transformation is in process. This doesn't mean that the pain is enjoyable, but it becomes bearable. It becomes integrated into the journey. And the mind, that's around that idea. This is especially true when the purpose is bigger than the individual. When you endure for something beyond yourself, a mission, a family, a cause, a legacy, the nervous system takes on a different orientation. You shift from self-preservation to contribution, from surviving to serving. And in that state, pain becomes less central. It's still there, but it doesn't define the experience. Meaning does. There's also a spiritual dimension to this. Purpose is not just a psychological tool. It is a connection to something transcendent, something that organizes your effort around a greater truth. When you're in pain, the body wants to contract. But when you're anchored in purpose, your awareness expands. You see the bigger picture. You remember why the suffering is happening. And that perspective gives you the energy to keep going. It doesn't necessarily make things easier, but it makes them clearer. Purpose brings coherence to chaos. It brings direction to the disordered energy of discomfort. It is the reason you show up again, even when the conditions are harsh.
It's why you train, why you commit, why you discipline yourself, why you endure. Without it, pain can become the dominant voice in your life. With it, pain becomes background noise, present, but not in control.
The biology follows belief. When you choose to assign meaning to your effort, your nervous system adapts in accordance with that choice. That's how humans are wired. So if you're in pain, the question isn't just, how do I stop this? What is this for? Who? When the answer is rooted in purpose, pain becomes a stepping stone, not a stumbling block. You begin to move differently. You start to carry weight with intention. You develop endurance that isn't just physical. It's mental, emotional, and spiritual. And that's when pain becomes not a prison, but a pathway, a way forward, a way through. Pain is not your enemy. It is your invitation. When you anchor your life in purpose, you stop running from discomfort and start transforming through it. You no longer see pain as a punishment, but as a necessary part of progress, refinement, and becoming. Every challenge becomes a chance to affirm who you are and why you're here. Purpose is the lens that clarifies the path and the force that carries you through fire without being consumed by it. So do not seek a life free. Seek a life rich with purpose, because when your why is strong enough, no pain can stop you. It may shape you, stretch you, even break you open, but it will never break you down. You were not built to escape pressure. You were built to rise through it. Let your purpose speak louder than your pain. Let it drive you, define you, and ultimately deliver you into the highest version of who you are.